Alrighty, so the other day, I was on the internet. Actually, I'm on the internet quite a bit. And I got in one of those YouTube holes, you know, where you start looking at something and then 5 hours of your life disappears and you've learned some fact. Well, I learned a fact about pineapples. So I would like to ask you all to think very seriously, how much would you pay for a pineapple right now? Really, seriously. What, €1? Couple? Anything? 2. What about 10? Whew, that's too much. 6. Whoa, you like pineapples. That's a premium pineapple price to pay. Okay, so the reason I got obsessed with pineapples is because I learned something fascinating, and that is that, first of all, pineapples take about 24 months to grow, and one plant makes one pineapple. So that's one of the reasons that they're a little bit hard to cultivate, however, very popular around the world. So one interesting thing, though, about 500 years ago, when pineapples first came to Europe, they sold for around $10,000. Why? Because they were sweet. And in those days, refined sugar was very hard to come by. So the uber wealthy were able to afford a pineapple because it was hard to bring them here, and of course, Europe, weather, not great, so it wasn't a very easy fruit to cultivate. So there was even a period where you could rent a pineapple to take to a party because they were seen as such a prestigious thing. I think we should just bring back the pineapple parties just to commemorate how ubiquitous pineapples are these days, right? So they're everywhere, they're devalued. So let me ask you another question. How much would you pay for a diamond ring? How much? 5, 10, 1,000? So the average diamond ring sells for about $3,500 to $5,000. And the thing is that we buy diamond rings because they're valuable, right? Diamonds are valuable? You might be wrong. So the deal with diamonds is that we perceive that they're rare, that there aren't many available. It's like gold. The reason you invest in gold is because there's not that much of it. And we know that because there are people who keep trying to make it, alchemists who keep failing. So ultimately, gold is a really valuable thing, whereas diamonds, they're not technically rare. That's completely false. In fact, diamonds are worthless in a true economic sense because there is plenty of them available. And the only reason that they're worth so much is because a cartel figured out how to manipulate the market about 100 years ago. Essentially, one of the reasons we use diamonds as a transference of love, you take money, you buy something shiny, is because they're shiny. They're so shiny. They reflect light, they're very strong. And the thing is when they first discovered diamonds hundreds of years ago, they were rare because we didn't have dynamite to make big mines and to satellite technology to uncover where they were hidden deep within the earth. But the thing is they're not rare. And the De Beers company, who went and basically developed the whole mining industry in South Africa at the end of the last century, the late 1800s, they basically found a lot of diamonds. And then they just like, we don't really want to sell these for a lower rate. So we need to do two things. One, we need to control the market. So they drip-fed diamonds into the market for a very long time. And the second thing is we need to manipulate the consumer base to want to own a diamond forever. Because the resale value of a diamond is 50% less once you walk out of a store with one, because you can't sell it for the same price you bought it for. So one of the so-called best advertising campaigns in the whole history is the idea that a diamond is forever, and that you, that's right, you, I don't know if you have a diamond, she's like me, that you would want a diamond from your potential respective husband as a token of their love. And the size of the diamond, the number of carats, and the amount of his salary that he spent would ultimately dictate how much he loved you. So we've gone and created a very invisible thing of love, and we've put it in this gemstone that actually is not that rare, but that a company figured out a really good way of manipulating the market so that we all thought that love and diamonds are synonymous. In fact, this stat down here, 1940 in the US, that was only 10% of women were proposed to with diamond rings. By 1990, that was 80%. So this whole concept, if you put the ring on it thing, completely constructed. Constructed to create a sense of value. And this is the thing. Value is this really strange concept. If I ask you to value yourself, you might find some adjectives or words to describe yourself. But to value something like the chair you're sitting on or the entire planet that we live in, it's extremely hard for us to imagine the difference between those two extremely big things, something physical and tangible, and something unimaginably big, like the entire planet. So value is this really strange thing, right? I'll tell you what's rare. A panda is rare. Because pandas can only be fertile for 3 days in a year. There's not many pandas. I'll tell you what's priceless. What's absolutely priceless is the service that bees provide to us. Because without bees, we wouldn't have hardly any of the fruits and vegetables that we all love. And yet we don't value these things. Our entire economy is based on this idea of a false sense of abundance. And the thing is that abundance does really wacky things to the human mind. I swear to you, the moment you have a lot of something, your perception of value towards it changes completely. Scarcity makes people do very strange things. And so we're wired for this kind of have a lot of something, exploit it, don't have much of it, conserve it, hoard it to yourself. Just think of the last piece of chocolate. You know what I'm talking about. Here's the thing. I think humans, we get it all wrong when we value things. We don't value things the way that we should. And the reason is because we've kind of wired our society to have this really strange reaction to things, okay? So things that are novel, like a purple fruit, just so exciting. Things that are really, really, really expensive, which I don't understand because Louis Vuitton handbags are not pretty. We buy them, we line up for them. This whole idea of like being the first person to own something. And then of course this whole idea of status. And what is status? Status is the idea that we have value, that other people respect us, they admire us, and potentially even love us, and put a diamond ring on it. And buy you a pineapple for $10,000. But the thing about all of this is it's about perception. It's about how we perceive the world, and our experiences of the world ultimately dictate how we value something. And this is where it becomes really tricky. Because something like a lobster, you can see where I'm going with this, we've got a lot of interesting fruits and vegetables and consumer products here. Lobsters. Do you think that they're valuable? Yes, they're expensive, right? They're like 30 euros for a lobster. Well, when lobsters first became available to eat, they were definitely not expensive. There were so many lobsters in the Americas that they were just like washing up on the beach and people were just going and collecting them. In fact, there were so many that were perceived as being a poor person's food, and they were served in prisons and all places that no one wealthy would go to. But then, supply and demand. Suddenly, you had to go further out into the ocean because everybody had eaten the lobsters, and they became more expensive and harder to get. So of course, what happens? Then all the wealthy people want them because they're now a scarce commodity. And so lobsters become extremely expensive. And the thing is that the lobster itself never changed. Nor did the pineapple. The pineapple tastes exactly the same as it did 500 years ago as it does today. Our ability to cultivate and grow it changed, and our perception of its value changed. And this is, as economists would refer to it as, the law of diminishing returns. Okay, so I need to use my arms to explain this. All right, so here is your enjoyment level. Obviously, we want it to go up. Here is your consumption of something. It stays pretty stable. You go along, let's use chocolate cake. Who likes chocolate cake? Okay, we're getting back some rapport here. Next time I'll bring you all cheese, by the sounds of things. Okay, so all right, well, here's our axis. All right, so we're going on this journey, right? We're eating chocolate cake. First piece of chocolate cake, delicious. Second piece of chocolate cake, pretty good. Third piece of chocolate cake, towards the end, not so delicious, start to feel a little bit sick. And then perhaps really have to run to the bathroom. And before you know it, chocolate cake, you're going to have to stay off it for a little while. I could just replace this with whiskey as well. This is a very... you can actually replace this with anything because this is the law that essentially the more you have of something that you like, there's a peak point of enjoyment, right? And then the value just drops off, whether it be because it doesn't excite you as much or makes you feel sick, doesn't matter. The point is that there's this peak point of enjoyment, things start to devalue as a result of that. And this is where we have so many problems because here we're talking about 7.4 billion people living on this planet and we want to understand how to live into the future in a happy, prosperous way. And so we don't know how to value happiness because the more we get of it, suddenly it becomes less obtainable. And so what is it that you value as happiness, right? Is it money? Is it success? Is it love? Our society is rigged for us to buy into the future. Okay, so we have a debt-based society these days, which means that we all trade our potential future earnings. Like, you go and get I don't know, I can't think of any other examples right now. I don't know, something expensive. And you go and buy it, and you have to go into debt in order to get it. And that makes you feel good. The thing is that we also have this thing called loss aversion, which is where humans really don't like losing things. Like, not just losing money, but when you don't win something that you set out to achieve. And so what happens is that it makes it easier for us to go into further and further debt. And I don't just mean monetary debt. I mean debt to ourselves, because we're buying into our future happiness each time we make that trade. Each time we fall into that trap of having more and more of the things that we want or we desire, we lose value. Things become valueless. And this is where it's really problematic, because the human mind, it really likes dopamine, which is the neurological reward system that you get from the chocolate cake, or when you fall in love. And we have this crazy system of reward and punishment. So basically, we have this linear economy. We extract resources, we transfer them into usable goods, then we trade them in the marketplace, and then we waste them. Humans create waste. We're the only species that actually creates a waste that doesn't have a resource. This is really problematic. It causes a lot of environmental issues. But more to the point, it reinforces our system called GDP, gross domestic product. I know, I said I was going to get boring and nerdy, so just bear with me, though. I hope there's a payoff. Okay, GDP was developed by this guy in the 1930s, Simon Kuznets, who himself said that it's the worst measurement of the success of nations. Yet every single nation in this world, except Bhutan, measures their GDP and uses that as the metric of success. The thing about GDP is it only measures what happens in the economy once you produce something. It doesn't give any value to anything that happened before you actually produce it, like you manufacture it. So for example, raising children or the access to freedom of speech, none of these things are measured in GDP, right? The worst thing about GDP is it gives absolutely zero credit to the environment. Zero. The service of a tree providing oxygen so that we can all breathe? No. So we have this metric system of success for our entire nation that essentially tells us, don't give a shit about the planet, only care about buying things to get that feeling of happiness, ignore the fact that you're going to hate what you actually bought, and get into debt. So this whole cycle, it creates a hyper-consumption loop. And this is the issue, right? GDP also, when you have a natural disaster, it increases because of all the costs you have to go into, fixing the things that got ruined. GDP, caskets, funeral industry increases when there's a mass disease and a lot of people die. GDP increases when you have an oil spill and people have to go and clean it up. GDP goes up. I think we can all agree oil spills are not good. Yet our economic system reinforces that. So basically GDP sucks. It's a terrible thing. We shouldn't have created it. Even the guy who designed it said it was terrible. So I feel like we probably need to reconsider this. And this is really about this concept of externalities, where essentially most of the things that GDP doesn't account for are impacting other people. So air pollution or the destruction of a natural environment, it affects the people who didn't benefit from the economic activity. And that's really where we have this problem. GDP reinforces a linear economy, and a linear economy reinforces our inability to access happiness and fulfillment, and it makes us not value things. And as a classic economist would say, you get what you measure. And our society is a product of what we have chosen to measure, consumption. We live in a hyper-fueled consumption society that has essentially been based off this idea of extraction and exploitation. That's what we do. We extract things and we exploit things. People, nature, other animals. And this is inherently wrong. It's morally wrong. And it also gives us an opportunity to reflect on how we can move into the future. There are many alternatives to GDP, and I strongly recommend you look into them, but I'm running out of time, and I have a lot of other things to say. So, let's keep going. I was named Champion of the Earth in 2016. It's an actual title. I know. I was really shocked too, and I want a cape. It hasn't happened. When I got a phone call from the United Nations, I didn't believe them, and I Googled it, and I was like, oh, Al Gore won it. Okay, I'll have it. So this was fascinating because I won it for the work I do. I run something called the Unschool. It's an experimental knowledge lab. We teach people how to mess with the system for positive change. And I do a lot of different things about bringing the invisible to light and telling stories and stuff about science. But here's the thing. I got this title, Champion of the Earth. You get it for life. And I was like, oh, I have no idea how nature works. this is a little bit of a problem if I'm going to have this title and be honest about it, right? So this is how I ended up being in this lovely country. I recently decided to engage in nature, okay? Like, not like go and hug a tree, because that would be weird, but to really understand how nature solves problems. And so I took on this project where an old abandoned farm in near Thomas that was left for over 20 years, and I started to convert it into a facility to run programs, but more importantly, a learning lab for how nature solves problems, okay? So here I go, I'm like serving all these people food and I'm figuring out how to grow things. This is why my YouTube involves a lot of fruit and vegetables, because I'm constantly searching how to not kill X tree, like orange tree, or how to grow blueberries. So that's why I get all these facts about vegetables and fruits. And when I planted my first garden there, I had this profound experience with a cabbage, which sounds terrible, but basically I grew a cabbage, and every day I'd have to water this bloody thing, and water would come out, and I'd be watching this cabbage, and I'd be like, this is magic. Like, every day it's getting bigger, and then finally the day comes I have to harvest the cabbage, and it's traumatizing. I'm like, well, man, I've been growing you for like months. I'm going to eat you in like one day. So I made sauerkraut. Then it lasted a lot longer. But the thing is that I realized that everything in nature has value. Everything contributes to something else. And that it's only us that has really devalued so many things. And that it's this extraction exploitation model that has created so many of the problems we see. So we've created a system that essentially exploits, and it doesn't value resources. We all know about the global environmental problems around waste, okay? So if we look at this, it's normal now for you to use something once and then throw it out. It's completely normal. Disposability is designed into every single facet of our lives, and that is new. That is by design. It only came about since the 1950s, and it is inherently wrong. Because what it does is it says that these things have no value, that plastic has no value because 50% of it is used as a single-use product and then wasted. And only 9% of all plastic produced is recycled or has been recycled ever. So we're at this point where we have to redesign the way we see things of value. There are so many people in this world, and we have really elevated ourselves to this incredible point in human history. It really is magical what we've done. Right? We have figured out how to do incredible things. We've elevated millions and millions of people out of poverty. We live in one of the safest times in human history, although your Facebook feed would say otherwise. We have incredible opportunities to make change. And what being in this system has taught me, being in this natural system that I'm growing, trying not to kill vegetables in, it has taught me a lot about food and our history and our experience of food. I think everybody in this room would agree we all like food. So basically food, it's a unifying factor of the human experience, and we have to grow a lot of it to feed the 7.4 billion of us, and we have to put all these inputs in, like phosphates, which is also something you excrete in your urine, by the way. Therefore, you should all go and pee on a lemon tree. That's a joke. You could do it, though, actually. It would be useful. Because the thing is that we have to put all these inputs into our agricultural systems, and they run off into the oceans, and they cause these things called algae blooms and dead zones, and we have over 450 dead zones all over the planet right now, which means that there's no oxygen and no marine life can live. And so our impacts, our choices, have massive impacts on the natural environment, and of course, as we said, we have absolutely no way of measuring whether or not those things are actually beneficial to us in the future, because GDP, our entire economic system, basically says, oh, the planet, meh, let's pretend it doesn't exist. And our exploitation extends to the exploitation of animals. I had to write this on my hand. 50 billion chickens are killed every single year. 50 billion. That's a lot of chickens. I mean, they're pretty silly animals, but we have more than 12 billion livestock on the planet right now that are destined to be eaten. We have created these crazy systems of exploitation in order to meet our needs, and they're having phenomenal impacts. And unless we change the way we value things so that when you do buy a steak, it is the highest quality version of that, not the cheapest one that meant that an animal had to be exploited, we will continue to perpetuate a devalued system. Which what that means is that the future is not going to be better than today. And personally, I don't want to live in that future. I want to wake up every morning and dedicate my life to figure out how I and all of you can contribute to a future that works better than today. Because otherwise, what's the point? And we have that power. That's the thing I think many people don't realize, is that we have the power to make change. You know, on the 1st of August last year, we went on Earth Overshoot Day. It's the day we extracted and used more resources than the Earth could replenish. And every year it gets lower and lower, meaning every year we are eating into the profit of the future. We are going into debt to not just our generation, but our kids in the future. And I don't want to guilt you, because that's not my goal in life. My goal in life is to give you the agency to realize every single choice you make has an impact. Every single decision that you make has the potential to make change. And so I want to leave you with this concept that I've been working with the United Nations, is this idea of your anatomy of action. Everyone show me your hand. Everyone has at least one, hopefully. I might be wrong. Okay, everybody has one of these. We do things with these every single day. And this is a really powerful tool. This tool can type words. This tool can brush teeth. This thing can pat people and puppies. And you have 5 areas in your day-to-day life that you do that have an impact on this planet. The first one is the food you eat, the stuff you buy, the way you move around your cities and your communities, the way you spend your money, and the way you have fun. And if you can make changes in each of those areas, believe me, the economy will change. I tell you now, the economy is made up of all of our individual actions. And companies and governments respond to the actions of the individuals. So you have the power to make change. Never forget that. And the future will be defined by the choices that we all make today. And so I hope that we can all work together to revalue the future so it's better than today. Thank you so much.